Hi, I'm Gina-R-Farrar, reinvention coach, creator and host of Feminine Roadmap podcast, and leader of this amazing global community of women. If you are approaching midlife or are already in the thick of it, welcome home. Please grab a cup of something wonderful and join me for some real talk, practical strategies, and a big dose of sisterhood. I am so glad you're here. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife. Today, we are going to be talking about how to live forward after loss. My guest's mission is to give hope to those who are devastated by any kind of loss and to encourage them that life can be rich and meaningful going forward. My guests today are David and Debbie Matthews. They are co-founders of the Life-Changing Spark of Life Retreat, and they are grief recovery specialists. David and Debbie, thank you so much for coming on to my show today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. It's our pleasure.
I'm really looking forward to hearing about your mission and message. Why don't you let my tribe know who you are and what it is that brought you to this grief recovery mission?
Well, Gina, we started about in 2009 after our grandson died in 2007. And we felt overwhelmed, not only for ourselves, but also for our children that was going through this traumatic loss. And so we decided then and there that we needed to pray and really reflect on what we could do to give back. And that's how Spark of Life was born.
And Josiah is the spark of life, but it's not the story of Josiah. It's just what we learned going through it. And the ride has been incredible. We've been able to do 110 in-person retreats and 2 virtual retreats. And we have met the most fantastic people in the world, people who have give up all over their life experience, but have not given up. And we're inspired by the participants at Spark of Life. They are our heroes. And, you know, a good hero never wants to be a hero. And they wish they were not heroes, but they are to us because, you know, when people get down and give up is around the corner and they don't give up. And so in our retreats and our online courses and the people we coach and things like that, and our team, we're just amazed at people who have the resiliency to get up and live again. And we see, like in our retreats, we see on Thursday night when we began and we have the introductions, it's very dark. People tell their stories. And then in 3 days by Sunday, all our pictures, group pictures, and we have 110 of them. Everybody's smiling in all of those pictures by Sunday. And it's just an amazing thing. So we don't try to fix people. We don't think they need fixing. They need to grieve in a healthy way. And what happens is we see hope return. And so we want to encourage them to live forward with their pain. And the pain is not going to debilitate them. It can mold them and shape them as it has so many. And so we're just honored to do this work.
We tell them when they come to a retreat, they actually have began the process of living forward. When they get online and search for help for grief and they find us, they actually are doing what we teach. They are trying to find hope. They're trying to live through this devastating thing that has happened to them. And so we tell them after they've told us about their losses on Thursday evening, you've actually made a step toward the right thing, and that's to live forward.
And most people don't realize they are because they feel so bad. They're in pain. And of course they are. And the losses, you can name the loss and they've come to our retreat. I mean, literally, you could name any loss from, of course, losing people to death, but divorce, of course, childhood sexual trauma, sexual abuse, sexual assault. We've had women who've been sold into sex slavery. We've had their parents, people who've lost their children to drug abuse and the kids are still alive. We've had families that didn't know where their baby girl was. She is sold, doing drugs and then sold into sex slavery. They found out later. Mm-hmm. Then we've had the kids come to the retreat. I mean, they have to be 18 or older to come. We've had people who've lost multiple kids, have lost their wives or their husbands and their children. We had one lady who was divorced. Her husband came in and said, "I don't love you anymore. I've got someone else and I'm leaving you." And an hour later, her son was killed in a car accident. She had that happen in one day. Mm-hmm. Story after story. And then there's those losses that you don't even think of as losses. And so, we have a couple of key, I guess you would call it key principles, all losses in context of other losses.
For women, you said most of your listeners are women in midlife. For me, it was hard for all of my kids to get, out of the house. The empty nest syndrome really hit me hard. And so I had to really delve into who I was, find out exactly how my identity was, and that it was in Christ, but it was in doing this work. It was in being a wife and a mother, and now a grandmother of 10 grandkids. So that was something that was really difficult for me. And a lot of women come because of that. They lose their jobs. And so what do I do? What's my purpose?
And Debbie, I think I can tell how old you were when we started this 15 years ago. She was 52. I was 57. I look 57, don't I, honey?
Yes. You do.
Okay. So I was 57. But I saw this woman. Of course, we were devastated when Josiah died, and really devastated for our son's sake and for his wife's sake. They were just overwhelmed with sorrow, of course. And our background kind of led us to, we had done small group work many times in my profession, and a whole lot of counseling, a whole lot of working with people in crisis. So we thought we were gifted to do it just from life experience and from formal education and real life education. And I saw this woman just blossom. I mean, she, what talent she has. And at 52, and when I say she's the spark of life, I mean it. And why don't you, I'll let you ask a question, Gina. We could talk all day about this.
No, and I really want you to. You touched on this already, but defining grief in a broader sense.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to have you kind of give maybe your definition when you say you do grief recovery. You've explained the kind of people, but when you talk about grief, what do you mean by grief?
Well, the Grief Recovery Institute, it's a book they put out called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And we give them a lot of credit for giving us ideas and concepts that I think are the most practical in the world. They define grief, as many do, as the normal and natural response to loss of any kind. Okay. For example, marriage problems, and we deal a lot with marriage problems. That's a huge loss. Loss of expectation is a huge loss. Going through a marriage breakup or marriage crisis, those are losses. And so the second part of definitions of grief is conflicting feelings caused by the end of or a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So my dad dies of Alzheimer's. Debbie's mother dies of a brain tumor and Alzheimer's. And we wanted them to die, right? I wanted them to go home. They were suffering. They didn't know who anybody was in their life. And so when they died, we had mixed emotions of relief and deep sadness. And then you start feeling guilty for feeling relief. Part of the people that help us have lost a kid to drug addiction, and they go through 15 years, if I may say this, of hell on earth, not knowing where their kid is, in and out of treatment, in and out of jail. And then the child dies at the age of 35, for example. Tremendous grief, guilt. Why wasn't I a better parent? If I could have done something better or more different. And then you have relief, but you don't want to admit you have relief, right? Because that doesn't seem right. How can you have relief when somebody you love so much and you want them alive, but there is relief? So mixed emotions. Retirement, it could be something that you want to do and you choose to do, but you don't know what's wrong. Well, I was preaching for 40 years. And when we started Spark, we eventually got out. And for 6 months, I was depressed. And we were teaching this stuff, weren't we? And what did you say to me? Maybe I'm grieving.
And I said, yes, you're grieving.
And so even though we wanted to do this work, it was a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. There's no more Saturday night pressure, for old Dave. And Debbie didn't know what to do with me either because it was different. Life was different.
Well, and with my mom, when she died, I had a lot of regrets and a lot of resentments. My mom loved me, but she was really hard on me. And so I had a lot of things that needed to be tied up. And so when people come with that kind of thing, they feel guilty for feeling that way. So I felt guilty. My mom loved me. She raised me. She gave me everything. But then I felt guilty for her dying and for feeling that way. So I had to go through our material really and try to get rid of any resentments, any regrets. And the regrets is what I had to apologize for. That's things I did that hurt the relationship. And the resentments are what she did that hurt the relationship. And so that was what was really troubling for me with my mom. And so I had to really deal with that. And I didn't really like looking at myself and looking at her in that way because she was my mom. I loved her, but she died. She left me. So I had a sense of abandonment at that point too. I'm adopted. So I felt abandonment from two mothers. So I had to deal with all of that. And really, Spark of Life and our material really helped me do that.
And one thing we've learned that Debbie just mentioned is that incompletes are what get people stuck in grief. It's called incompletes. So in our retreats and our online course and everything we do with people, we help them complete the incompletes. And that's an overlooked thing in grief recovery, because if I have, and there's 2 points here, all loss is in context of other loss. So all unforgiveness, for example, is in context of other unforgiveness. So somebody comes to a retreat and they're mourning the loss of maybe their child or their spouse, but there's another loss back there that they haven't completed, and it affects how they deal with the present loss. So we found this statement that incompletes with the past tend to repeat themselves in the present and the future. And so the incompletes, they're a huge factor in a healthy grief recovery. If you wait till April 15th to put your taxes in the mail, which I used to do every year, that's an incomplete. So I lose sleep coming to April 15th. But at April 15th, 11:59, I drop that tax return in the mail. I feel freer. Okay. And that's just a snippet of how people feel if there's an incomplete in the past, such as a childhood sexual abuse, or your mom got drunk every night, or your dad abandoned the family, and you're at our retreat for a different reason. And all loss is in context. So we have this in every retreat. Every person we work with personally, they end up sometimes working on losses that they didn't come to get help for. And when they complete those losses by dealing with regrets and resentments, right, then it frees them up to deal with the present loss that they really come for. And it really does work. It really does make a difference. I feel freer. And Debbie found her birth mother because we make people do a loss story, we call it, of all their losses, and then a relationship story on their toughest loss. That's the most incomplete. And in the middle of one of our early retreats, Debbie came back to the room we were staying with, said, I need to do my relationship story on my birth mother that she had never met. Why don't you just tell real quickly about that?
Well, and the thing about Spark too is we learn at every retreat about ourselves. There's something that triggers something in our brain and says, I hadn't really dealt with that. Something that a participant says or comes to us and asks the same question. So my mom and my birth mom were girlfriends. And my mom who raised me could not have children, which is a loss, devastating loss. And so then my birth mom wasn't married at the time, and she had me and my brother, and then later she had my sisters. I found them all. My brother adores me. My sisters adore me. They accepted me without one bit of angst in their spirits at all. And so I had to deal with all of that, deal with, okay, I've got a mom who abandoned me, so to speak, but she gave me to a mom who loved me, and she loved me. Didn't mean that my mom who had me didn't love me. She did.
But you felt abandoned,
but
no matter what.
No matter, yes, no matter how good the situation, I still had the abandonment issues all through my life. And so when my mom who raised me died, that was another mom who abandoned me. When my birth mom died 3 months after I met her in the nursing home, she dies. That's another mom who abandoned me. Dave's mother died after that, and I was very close to her. So that's another mom leaves. And so that was just really devastating in so many levels and ways. And so I had to deal with that, and I had to write relationship stories on all of these people and figure out the kind of relationship that I had and what was good about it, what was bad about it, and what I missed in all of it.
Yeah, she had to admit resentments. It's really hard for people who've lost a loved one, but all these losses are connected. Yeah. They all affect how we do it. But we got to be honest with our resentments. Most people bury those. If you don't give voice to your pain, if you don't do that, it will affect other relationships that you want to keep going. And that's the problem with being stuck in grief. You know, our motto is, we're not here to fix you. You need to grieve. And there's nothing, quote, wrong with you. You're grieving. But most people think something's wrong with them. Why am I stuck? Well, some people are stuck. We had a couple come whose teenage daughter had taken her life by suicide. We have a lot of suicide losses. And we were talking about honesty and admitting your resentments. And this is what she said. We're in Alaska by the Kenai River on this retreat. This is a pretty cool place. And she said, well, I'm here to tell you right now, if I died today, and I believe my daughter's in heaven, and she greets me at the pearly gates, as it were, she'll want to hug me. I will not hug her. I will say, hold on, sister. I am so pissed at you. Can I say that on the air there? I am so pissed at you for taking your life, the hurt and the pain you've given on us. And so then I might hug her, but I'm going to tell her that because I'm angry at her. That's healthy. That is healthy because that is raw. That's real. She really felt that. And so at our retreats, when we have people do a relationship story on their toughest loss, they have to list their resentments, their regrets, but we also want them to list their good memories. So we call them remembrances, the 3 R's. And they have to be honest, but we want them to remember the good times. Okay. And then, but they have to be honest with the regrets and the resentments. And so then they write a letter, and the letter is, I apologize for all the stuff I did that hurt the relationship. And you list what you apologize for. And then you write then you say, I forgive you for, Mom, I forgive you for getting drunk every night when I was in junior high and high school. I forgive you for giving my brother this and not me. I forgive you for whatever. And Debbie had to do that. I had to do that with my mom. I had to literally write, I forgive you. And then, but Mom, I remember this. You know, then you list the good things. And then you say, goodbye, Mom. I love you. I really miss you if you do miss them. And if you do love them, say that. And then goodbye. Now we've wrapped up the incompletes. We've done all we can do. And there's one statement called, all you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough. It's enough when I've done all I can do. So if I'm waiting for Mom to come back and say she's sorry, right? So what's keeping us in the pit of grief? It's not the loss. The loss propels us to the pit, right? But if the loss is responsible for me staying in the pit, I will be in the pit for the rest of my life. And then I will have other relationships that are hurt. So we know some cases like that. The relationships on this earth are hurt because somebody is still in the depths of the pit. And there's no magical time frame on this, but nobody really wants to be stuck in the depths of the pit of grief. So how do you get out? The loss is always going to be there. So you live forward with your pain. Yeah.
I have a quick question for you. Actually, I have a comment and a question while we're in this thought. You know, it sounds like the layers, and this is what I found to be true, and you can confirm this. The layers are what complicate and confuse the current issue, I think.
Absolutely.
We're carrying everything forward. I do remember when we were young marrieds, one of the couples in our Bible study, the wife was particularly damaged. And she just reflected all of her disappointment in her father to her husband, to the degree that it did end up destroying their marriage.
Right.
And within the first 7 years, like she was constantly holding him accountable for the issues that she had with her father. Now, the abandonment issue, Debbie, my mom was a young mom. She was 8 when she got pregnant with me. And my biological father was a married man. So clearly I was abandoned as well. Right. And so I resonate with that because I didn't think it mattered.
Oh, yeah.
I became an adult and then it came out of nowhere. And between that and the abusive stepfather that I had, it took years to kind of work through the walls and the whatever I had put forward. But that brings me to my question or my idea that grief looks so different, and I want to talk a tiny bit about what grief can look like, because if somebody doesn't know, like me, that grief was actually happening to me and happened in traumatic kind of physical memories, not mental memories. My body remembered and something would happen and just trigger this crazy emotional ride.
Right.
And I had to first figure out what in the world just happened to me and then face it. And there's these layers to grief. Grief is not a straight journey, I don't think. So can we talk a little bit about what grief can look like so that maybe someone hearing this can be like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Grief is very tricky. It's subtle. That's why all losses, right? So somebody says, why don't you just do just work with people who've lost children or work with people who've just lost grandchildren because we lost a grandchild. Well, because it's a lot deeper than just that loss, right? If you focus on one loss, you might miss something. So a couple's having marriage problems and the husband treats her like crap and he's dominating her and controlling her. We work with a lot of marriages in crisis. So they're okay. And everybody says, you got to stop that. Actually, he's being passive aggressive. He never yells. He never screams, but he's controlling her. So he comes to a retreat and it comes out that when he's doing his lost story, something triggers in him. When he was 8 years old, he came home from school early on the school bus. They let out early for some reason. He walks in to see his mom, who's a stay-at-home mom at the time. And he walks in on her having sex with the next door neighbor. He's 8 years old. He never says a word about that for years, for like 35, 40 years. They come see us. Okay. That was undiagnosed grief that he had stuffed in his unconscious. And then he was triggered. Okay. Doing a lost story, he's triggered. Right. And so he finally tells his wife and he finally tells the group. And it's like, oh my goodness, this explains everything. Now, did they still have scar tissue? Did she have scar tissue? Did they have to work through it? Of course they did. But see, if you limit grief to the obvious, you might miss something that can open up doors of healing for you. So we had another guy come. His sister had taken her life by suicide 5 years earlier. He's 45 years old. It's been 5 years. He said, I don't know why. I love my sister. I miss my sister. Why is this debilitating me? He does his lost story. He remembers when he was in college and he was a Christian. He had values and ethics and morals. He had a girlfriend. He got the girlfriend pregnant. That went against his value system, his morals. He felt guilty about it. And then she was excited about having his child. And he said, you're not having the child. He made her get an abortion. She fought him on it, but she didn't want to lose him. He drove her to the abortion clinic. She got the abortion. He drove her back to the dorm and dumped her. He never talked to her again because of his guilt and his shame. He hadn't told anybody about it for 30 years, right? And why couldn't he get past his sister's suicide was because of his guilt from 30 years earlier that was unresolved. So to say what grief looks like, it looks like, oh, everything's perfect in this guy's life, or it looks like they're not grieving at all, or it looks like it's not affecting, or it looks, why can't he get through this? And so it's all kinds of shapes and looks, if that explains it. That's why all loss is in context of other losses.
I feel like people, they think of it in terms of just like crying, like thinking about a specific expression. But I know I was sharing before we hit record that my mother-in-law passed away in May of 2021. And we knew it was coming, but in our home, because I was her caregiver, my husband and I partnered to make sure everything she needed was taken care of. It was sleep. We were every day we needed to nap.
Yeah.
We're kind of coming out of that now. It's been about a month, but it's really interesting because we did so much for her. We would have these like, I got to keep my phone out because the nurse might call, and then you realize, oh, they're not going to call. And there's just this really strange kind of surreal, you know what I mean? I'm just saying our experience, and his disconnect with his mom added that, like you said, that complication or that other layer. And there are definitely incompletes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That could not be completed because of her challenges.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I would say like fogginess, sleepiness, lethargy, that's kind of what I'm seeing in this specific situation in our home.
Well, it's very real. And there's common responses to grief, obviously, but it comes in all shapes and sizes, right? One thing I want to say before it's too late, we heard this quote, and you might have used it. It's never too late to have a happy childhood. It's never too late to have a happy childhood. I wish I could give credit to who originally wrote that or said it. And there's another quote that last night's TV show, America's Got Talent, a friend was telling me about it this morning. This woman has cancer, and she was singing a song she wrote, and it just moved everybody. And they said, how could you do this? Facing all, and the cancer's growing in her, right? And she goes, I don't have to wait until I stop hurting to be happy. Well, listen to those two quotes. They're just profound. And I can say that because I didn't make them up. I mean, I didn't come up with it, right? But we have seen that to be true. If I'm waiting to stop hurting to start living forward, I'm going to wait a very long time. Because my lost story, Debbie's lost story, your lost story keeps going. There's no end to it till we die. Right. And then our friends and family have added loss. Right. But for us, it doesn't really stop. The pain is still there about Josiah. It will never go away. You never get over it. But that is not a doom statement. Right. Because I don't have to wait till I stop hurting to live a rich and fulfilled and meaningful life. And that's what we found late in life, a mutual aspiration of helping others who are grieving. And we're not a hero. They're the heroes. And it draws us together, right? So we still have pain. You still have pain, but you're living forward also with hope because you're giving yourself to other people. And to us, that's the exciting thing.
Well, a lot of times too, we think we're going crazy, and it's really grief that's happening. And your brain is just so overwhelmed from it. We call it grief brain. You can't think how to pay bills. You can't keep the calendar going for the kids, or you can't you can't be there for other people because your brain is just overwhelmed from whatever happened to you. And that's the same way. And we say too, I wanted to go back on the completing the incompletes. If you were abused as a child, you don't have any regrets, because you didn't do anything to that relationship. You only have resentments.
In other words, you would not apologize to the abuser.
Apologize to the abuser.
There's nothing to apologize for.
But the grief brain is really, it causes you to think something's wrong with you. And that's what we try to tell you. There is nothing wrong with you. You just have grief, and learning how to deal with it and figuring it out too is really what Spark of Life tries to do.
As we're talking about this, the kind of grief that people can be going through, it triggered in my mind in a positive way, because triggers are a real thing.
Yeah,
they can be
right.
emotional, and a lot of the time they're physical, which is what happened to me. I didn't have physical memories, if you will, of my mom being abused, but my body, doggone it, my body knew. And there was a specific part of my body when I was an adult, these things started triggering me. And the same part of my body would always feel like I'd just gotten, sucker punched. And I think the profound part of this, and you said something that made this thought pop up, is that everyone has triggers. We all have experiences, some dealt with, some not dealt with, some buried so deep we don't remember, or we don't even identify with it. And that's what makes relationships so complicated.
Absolutely.
We're triggering each other and bumping up against each other, and we think that person's the problem. My marriage is the problem, or my kids are the problem, or my boss is the problem. And sometimes I think they're just hitting us in a raw spot, or our thoughts hitting them in the raw spot. And I think that's something that an awareness, why do I feel this way? Why do I get this response, or why do I have this response? Like there's a long journey, worthwhile journey, but it really, it's work, but it's worthy work.
It's worthy. Yeah.
Well, and most people too, they handled grief with doing what we call STIRBs. It's short-term energy releasing behaviors. We'll drink too much because we can't identify that loss, or we'll take prescription drugs, or we'll start exercising feverishly and trying to do that, or we'll do good works. We'll get involved in church, and we just want to do as much good as we can, and we're not really handling it's great to do good things. I mean, that's awesome, but we're not handling the issue at hand, and we're not identifying the grief. And there are so many other kinds of STIRBs too, that it's just the behaviors that we take up because we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. And these behaviors, they work for a little while, so they're short term. But like one person said, a lot of men will, they'll go back to work the day after losing 2 children, for example, and they got to keep busy, and then they got to be strong for others. All myths that we talk about at our retreats and our work. And then one man said, yeah, I've worked 80 hours a week for the last 2 years after my son died. I go back home. He's still not there. He's still not there. So so that's your great question. What does grief look like? It can look like somebody's handling it real well, and they're not. Right. Now, there's some griefs that are complete. I never had to do any grief work on my dad. Never had to. Right. Because things were complete. There was no incompletes there. There was no resentments I hadn't dealt with. There was no regrets that I had. And that's the way it is with some people. Everybody doesn't need to come to a retreat at every death, right? Or get help. But many do, because they really haven't dealt with it. We could tell you story after story. The people who work with us, Terry and Dennis lost a son a daughter to murder. Her husband murdered her. They now help us with Spark of Life retreats. Tell them about Jean real quick, who's in her 80s.
Well, Jean and her husband, David, had been married for like 56 years. Well, he died. And so she found herself, asking herself, so what do I do now? I have no purpose. They were in ministry. And so she didn't know what to do. So she was super overwhelmed. And so when she came to Spark, just the things that happened and words that were said, she said, I now have purpose. I know that at 80 something years old, I can still give back. I can still have a life that's rich.
So tell them what she does today.
She calls everyone that comes to a Spark of Life event. She calls them and checks on them, says, how are you doing? Is there something we can do for you? Is there some way we can help you? And so that's what she does now. That's her purpose, is to help Spark of Life.
She looks 10 years younger than she looked when she came to a retreat. She came to our virtual retreat we had a couple of weeks ago just to be there, and she worked on another loss that she didn't even had thought about. And she's beaming, she's smiling. She helps Spark of Life. She works with us in helping others, and she's 80 something years old. Okay. She has purpose outside of herself. And that's what we found with people. Our motto is there is always, always hope. Always hope, no matter what. And the people we work with often think there is no hope. And we've had people on Thursday at the retreat say, I'm here because I'm with my wife. She wanted me to come. There's nothing you can say. There's nothing you can do this weekend that will give me hope. He said that on Thursday night. On Sunday, he's hugging everybody with a smile on his face. And he turned to us and he said, this has not been a waste of time. You have not wasted your time on me. And now he's a good friend. And they had us come to their church, do a grief workshop. We do grief workshops at churches all around the nation. We've done 70 of those with businesses as well. And they're different than a retreat, but it's the same material. And we help churches develop a grief ministry that's organized and that reaches the community and reaches not only their people, but the community. And by the way, everybody in this world is hungering for something to deal with their grief. Mm-hmm. It's a universal thing.
What about grief? That feeling of loss, but the person's still on the planet.
Yeah.
You're in a relationship with someone and there's resentment and loss and a disconnect. Yeah. What do you do in that case?
Well, and we've had mothers come and say their daughters won't talk to me. They won't have anything to do with me, or sisters or someone else. And, it goes back to all you can do is all you can do. They can do a relationship story on that child or that loved one, that sister. The dad won't talk to me anymore.
Or the divorce.
And it's just they have to go through the process and definitely put it on. I call it my lost journey. It's my journey through life, because through life I have losses. Loss upon loss. And once I've identified that and identified that, okay, my daughter won't speak to me, saying it out loud is also a way of healing and not denying it, but then also doing a relationship story on that person to help define what kind of things in the relationship have I missed? What kind of regrets or resentments have I not dealt with?
And a real big issue there is it's for them. It's not for the relationship. If the relationship is over, if it's toxic, for example, a husband that beats his wife, domestic violence, they do exactly what everybody else does. They do their lost story, put it in context. They do the relationship story. They write the letter. They forgive and they apologize if they have to. If it's an abusive situation, you don't apologize. In other words, you're not going to apologize for sexual abuse, right? If you've been abused, but that's not healthy. But it's not a letter to give to the person if they're still alive. It is for them. So we talked for 2 hours on Saturday afternoon about forgiveness, and forgiveness is a decision, not an emotion. And so I can forgive somebody and not reconcile with them, right? Some people are too toxic. It's too toxic to reconcile. So people always say, well, I don't want to give this letter to the person who's alive. It will cause havoc. This letter is not to give to them. If you want to do that, that's between you and them. But this letter's for you, right? It's for you. And they read that letter in their small group. And so they have a small group of 2 or 3. And here's the key to that. Grievers think something's wrong with them. What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. You're grieving. And then they share that in their small group. And the small group's instructed, you don't try to fix this person. You just listen. So as they give voice to their pain, they're validated because another human being's listening and they're not condemning them for sometimes the lost stories on God. The God I used to know is not the God. And they have resentments toward God. We've had people do lost stories on God. We've had people say, I hate God because their little baby died and they prayed to God that he wouldn't die. am I welcome here? And we say, absolutely, you're welcome here. Your emotions and your feelings are your emotions and feelings, and it's okay. It's okay. And then they come back. The one that said, I hate God by Sunday, she said, I want everybody to know I don't hate God anymore. I've just been loved this whole weekend and accepted as I am. We're not buddies yet, but I don't hate him yet. I think that's pretty good progress.
It's interesting how, like I was mentioning earlier, when we are triggered, anger also is a part of the grieving process. But
absolutely,
anger looks so different. For some people like me, if I'm angry, nobody wonders.
Me too.
But there are
way to go.
Yeah, no questions asked.
Yeah.
There are other people, their anger is so under the surface. And I think grief brings anger with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're a person that stuffs their emotions and stuffs it for years and years and years, like I did. And so then when, later on in life, it starts really coming out. Well, then the anger is just an outburst and you don't know why.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why am I like this? I never have been an angry person. I've, got along with everybody. But then I'm like, I want to kick the dog or slam the door or throw a cup. And, and it's just, that's where it's been. People, it just depends on the person and how they handle things. And for me, I stuffed for a long time and it's not healthy. It's not healthy.
I resonate with that. I was always, cheerful and everybody relied on my smile. They would tell me, oh no, you're our positivity person.
Yeah.
You're always happy. And then people couldn't handle if I wasn't. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? How
yes, it is.
Our identities get wrapped up in the process as well, don't they? Because then how do we show our emotions when people's expectations are that we're this supposed to be like this?
Yeah.
And let me ask one more thing real quick. I have also noticed that, let's say I've lost someone really special to me and someone in my life goes, you just need to get over it. It's been 2 years or whatever. Like other people's discomfort with our grief is another issue I think people have to overcome, isn't it?
Every retreat we talk about myths and we call them myth information. And these myths become myths because there's an element of truth to them. At least they're in a better place. That never helps, by the way, when people are in grief. At least they've led a full life. At least they're not suffering. God will give you more children. At least you're young enough to remarry. All that stuff doesn't help. So when we do workshops at businesses and churches or faith-based organizations, many kinds of churches or faith-based organizations, really, we find this is what I say. I say, we have a section on how to help those who are grieving. And I say, here it is. Write this down. Shut up and be there. Shut up and be there. You don't have to say a word. Be there. Because people are hurt by other people's statements when they are in loss. And you go to a funeral home and in one state, you have to wait in line and they're by the casket, right? The loved ones are by the casket. And you just hear all the statements people are making. And I've done 150, 200, 300 funerals in my day. And I've heard it all. And everybody tries to fix the person with a little snippet. Like, I've been through that too. I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. Nobody knows how the other person feels. I don't care if it's exactly the same outward loss, a 7-year-old boy who drowned, for example. Even those two people don't understand each other totally because every loss is different because relationships are different. So a husband and wife can lose the same child and grieve in different ways. And one thing that we do really does help marriages is stop trying to force your way of grieving on your spouse. She cries too much, she's weak. He never cries, he didn't care. He wants to go back to church. I don't. Okay. And we could tell you stories, endless stories of this very point that other people's response to you can hurt you in your grief. So we do teach people, how do you in a healthy way respond to people? You can walk away without saying a word. or the best response I heard one of our people give, she says, David, that doesn't really help me right now. What helps me is you just being here. Okay. Or to the extreme of, I'm not going to be around that person anymore. It could be a family member that just is destructive in how they're trying to help you. You have every right to not be around them. You have every right not to be around a friend who a year to the day after the lady lost her 25-year-old son on Thanksgiving Day, and her best friend called her, and her name was Debbie. And she said, Debbie, it's been a year. It's time you get over this. I love you. She's never spoken to that woman again. She has that right to do that, because one of the takeaways is you are in charge of your recovery. Nobody else is. And so recovery is a decision. It is not an emotion. And if you wait until you feel like it, right, to get up and wash your face, as it were, you might wait a long time. So yes, you need to give yourself permission to grieve and also permission to recover. And you are in charge of your own recovery. Debbie's not in charge of mine. Now, she can help me by being there for me, and she is, and I can help her, and I can help you, and you can help me, but not to fix us.
Well, and let's go back to what you said. People put time frames on different kinds of losses. Okay, it's been a year. You need to get over this. Well, all that does is make that person mad, and then they don't want to be around
or feel guilty
that what's wrong with me? Why am I not feeling better or doing better? And that just injures the relationship between the person that said that, because, it's like he said, your recovery is your recovery, and it's up to you to do it and to decide when, okay, it's time for me to get up and what we call wash our face. It's time for me to get up and wash my face and move forward and live forward. But you don't, saying that to someone just alienates you from that person.
So we do teach how to respond to that, and what are the healthy ways. No, don't physically harm anybody, even though you want to, right? Yeah. Don't do that, but you take care of yourself, and you can do that in a kind way, but everybody's not going to look at that as a kind way. Like trying to get people to go back to church. And I really hone in on this one, because so many times faith people think there's something wrong with their faith because they don't want to go back to church, or they're angry at God. And we even cover that without preaching. We don't preach to people. We have atheists come, agnostics come, we have faith-based people come, we have Muslims, Catholics, Jewish people. We love them all the same, because grief is the great unifier. And we have never had one problem with people getting along with others at a grief retreat. We've had a couple when people try to fix others, but our rule is you're not here to fix anybody. We're not going to fix you. We don't have the power nor the right to try to fix you, but we're here for you. And I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. It's just a huge difference. And that's why we love what we do. And people say, I get a haircut, we travel, and they say, what do you do for a living? I said, I almost hate to tell you. So I tell them, and I have people, why would anybody be involved in death all the time? I said, no, you didn't hear me. We're spark of life. We're not spark of death. We're life. So we speak life into people, and it's the greatest joy in the world. You do the same thing, by the way, Gina. You speak life into people, and speaking life into people is what it's all about, right? And so we give them that they have to decide what they're going to do when they get home to turn their anchors into sails, to keep turning their anchors to sails. And a boat can be anchored in the dock, and it could be a $10 million boat. But if you never take it out and get it dirty, well, it's wasted, right? So we wanted to help them turn their anchors to sails as they sail forward, living forward with their pain, right? And finding a purpose outside themselves. And that's one of the key components of a healthy recovery. It really is.
So as we round up our time, I would love for each of you to give me 3 things that you want people to hear. It can be a message, a tool, a strategy. It's whatever God has put on your heart. So Debbie, I'm going to start with you. Give me your 3.
I think my first one is not to be afraid of going through the loss journey. We can always be afraid and fearful that I can't handle this, or whatever thoughts that might be flashing through your mind. I don't want to remember that. So I think that's one of the things for me. And just to realize that completing the incompletes did so much for the peace and comfort that it gave me. So that's number two, is I felt so much relief and peace that I can't really describe it in the best way. It's like a burden had been lifted off my body and my spirit. And so I really think, and I actually done more relationship stories than he has. It's just on individuals that I needed to make it complete with that person. And it was freeing. And just also that we meet so many wonderful people. I guess that's the thing that is the best thing that's happened to me, is I've met some of the most amazing individuals that have gone through the grief journey, and that they have come, and I've gotten to give them a hug. I've gotten to love on them and just really encourage them and help them. So I think that's my three things.
My three things. Number one, there's always hope. If one person can face tragedy and live forward and live a joyful life again, then I can. There's always hope. Number two, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. You need to learn how to grieve in a healthy way, perhaps. And number three is my recovery is my recovery. Own my recovery. And that doesn't mean don't get help. We want everybody to go to sparkoflife.org. We want everybody to come to retreats who need to. No, we need help. I need help. So a healthy recovery, choosing my own recovery, saying it's up to me to decide to recover, does not mean I don't get help. No, it means I probably do get some help. I want to talk to somebody. I need to talk to somebody. And we're here for that. We're not the only ones. There's other people helping those who are grieving. Did I give three? Mm-hmm. Was that three?
I think so.
Okay. I could give 18, but that's three. Okay.
Well, that's the beauty of what you do. How do people find you? Where can they find you?
Just go to sparkoflife.org. We have a number on there, and then I will get in contact with you and either email you or call you, and you'll have my cell phone and my email address, and Dave's email is on there as well. So Debra, Debra at sparkoflife.org.
Yeah, same thing, sparkoflife.org, and go to our YouTube channel, and you go to our website, and of course you can hit that little YouTube button. There's tons of videos on there I've done. We have some podcasts as well online. We have tons of videos on YouTube that cover a wide, like we've talked today. I'm still doing those, of course. And then the big thing is online, but we have an online course that people can take one-on-one. In other words, some people do not like to share anything, but in that online course, it's all our grief material, a lot of what we've talked about today. And along with that, you get 3 coaching sessions with the grief certified coach. The coaches we have trained have all been through devastating loss, and they help us with retreats. We can't do it all ourselves. They are great people who care. And then we have virtual retreats. You can come to, it's exactly the same as our in-person retreats. It costs a lot less. You don't have to travel, right? We have our second one coming up this weekend. I know this is recorded, but the first online virtual retreat, which retreats in kind of quotes, was equally as powerful as our in-person. We were amazed how powerful it was. And we've got testimonies on that. We've got a lot of things online of people who've come to retreats. Listen to what they say. There's help available. And we just got to get that message out, because this isn't about us. We know that. It's about a world that's full of pain. And we're in it together with the rest of the world. Let's help each other to live forward with hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you both so much, David and Debbie, for coming on today and sharing your mission, your message, your passion. Thank you for stepping into such a
mess,
not definable space, and doing the work for yourselves so you can help others, right? It's very malleable, isn't it? And I'm
Yes, it is.
grateful for your message and for your turning your pain into something powerful. It's so encouraging when hope shines through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You've been gracious and sweet, and we already love you, Gina. We already love you.
Thank you so much.
It has been my pleasure. Today, my friends, I've been speaking with David and Debbie Matthews. They are co-founders of the Life-Changing Spark of Life Retreat and Grief Recovery Specialists. If you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 232, I will have links to everything that David and Debbie shared. So if you weren't able to get it written down, don't worry. I have hyperlinks for you there. Friends, grief is something that touches all of our lives, and it's great to understand that there is hope and that we can live forward. And your grief is your grief. There's nothing wrong with you, and the way that you go through it is the way that you go through it. So relieve yourself of that pressure of doing it right or doing it someone else's way. Get the tools and the help that you need. Find those people that can surround you with the kind of support and love that you need, and it's okay. And if someone is living that you're grieving, there are things you can do there too. There's always something hopeful that you can cling to. So if you are in grief, which all of us are in some way, shape, or form, there is hope, my friends. Get these resources, tap into them, share them with those that you know might need it, but don't pressure them. Let them come.
That's right.
Let them come to it when they're ready. So thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to sharing more resources with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.